Hey everyone, Bandit here. Welcome back to the Bandit Flight Simmer channel. Today on the channel we're going to do a quick tutorial video on the latest update to the Working Title G1000 NXi mod. They just released version 0.10 and we're going to look at those features in the mod today. To do that, we're going to do a quick trip from Stewart International, which is in New York State, just north of New York City, just off the Hudson River, and we're going to head south down to Washington D.C. to Ronald Reagan International Airport. That's KDCA. Got a great approach we can shoot there, and can really take advantage of the features of the NXi. So without further ado, let's hop in the cockpit and get things going. Okay, we're starting off in the Baron Cold and Dark for this tutorial. If you like these kind of videos, make sure you hit the like button. Really appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you subscribe to the channel, sign up for notifications, and you'll see other tutorials like this on updates on the NXi and various GA flights using that system in various aircraft. I do a Around the World series right now in a Diamond DA62, and I plan on doing some in-depth tutorials on the PMDG 737 when that gets released. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, sign up for notifications, and you'll see those videos when they're released. Just a caveat before we get going here, they put out this new update for the NXi and it's not working with some of the airplanes. They had some issues with the DA62. It was also in the Pilatus, and there was a third airplane, I can't remember offhand, that it doesn't work in. So if you use, especially if you use the DA62 extensively, don't install this update. They're going to put a fix out shortly, but you get stuck in startup mode with the G1000. So make sure you don't install the update if you're using any other aircraft. Works fine in the Baron, so we're going to demonstrate those features in the Baron. So the first change we'll notice is when we turn on the battery to the aircraft. So turn on the battery, and I'll just turn on my alternators just so they're ready to go, and you'll see the system boot up. And this is the first difference we're going to notice is we're in AHR's alignment system. The system's booting up, and then we have all these X'd out displays that show until those alignments are complete. And the other thing you'll notice is a thing they call PFD reversion, which puts the engine instruments on the PFD when the MFD is not active. So this allows us, without turning on the avionics master, so we need to have the avionics master on to get the MFD active. So the engine instruments revert to the PFD, and now we can start the airplane with just the PFD. We don't need to turn on the avionics master and the MFD. So that's a great feature. It saves battery power for when you want to get the aircraft started. So we can go ahead and conduct our start now using just the PFD because we have everything we need. So let's go do that. So we'll put our fuel on. So fuel is on. We've got our battery on, alternators are on, ready to go. We'll get our nav light on. And we will just prime the boost pumps. We'll shut those off. It's clear to the right, clear to the left. And we'll just turn on our starter for the right engine. And just add some mixture. Get that going. So T's and P's are coming up. And we'll do the same thing to the left engine. And there we go. Good start on both engines. Temperatures and pressures are coming up. So now we have a good start on both engines. You'll notice we still have nav 2 radio and the COM2 radio X'd out because they are not on the main battery. They're on the, we have to have the avionics master turned on for that. So the next thing we'll do is now we got some power, we got our alternators on. So we'll turn on the avionics master. That will boot up our MFD, and now it's going to show the latest working title NXi system. So we're on version 0.10.0, and the nav data that's effective for this. I'm using Navigraph data, so that's the effective dates for this Navigraph data, December 2nd till 29th, 21. So that's great info to have on your boot up. Now press the key to continue, and you'll see the X's went out on our COM2 and NAV2, and the system is booted up all ready to go. So that's the first difference you'll notice, and if you lose those in flight, if you shut off the power and lose the system in flight and you do a reboot, the same thing will happen in flight. You have to maintain wings level while the alignment system goes through its process. So that's the first difference, and so now let's get the flight plan loaded up and go over what we're going to do for today's flight. Okay, for today's flight we'll head down to the MFD here and we will get our flight plan page up, and we'll put in our departure. It's KSWF. And I'm using my Class Echo input device to control the GPS here. Just saves a lot of time, a lot easier for me to do. So we're going to do departure there. We'll go down to our destination. We'll put in KDCA, which is Ronald Reagan Airport. Here we go. And we'll put a couple of fixes for our en route. We're just going to COATE, C-O-A-T-E. Okay, and our next fix is to Mike X-Ray Echo, which is a VOR. So Mike X-Ray Echo, and enter, and that looks good. So that's our flight plan. We'll just cursor out and see how that looks. Heading in the right direction down to DCA there. So those two fixes. We'll put in our departure procedure now. So we go to the procedure page, select departure. And there's only one departure here. It's the Stewart departure, and we're going to be going off runway 27. The winds are light. Now this is the next feature that you'll see for the NXi, is you're going to get the full procedure depicted on the map when you select the procedures. So when I cursor through the runways here, it's going to show the different procedures. So this is runway heading to 2000, right turn, off of runway 9, straight ahead, a little bit of a left turn, and 3-4. So it shows all the depiction of all the procedures and all the waypoints. So that's a nice handy feature. We're going to just go off 27. The winds are calm here, and that's heading in the direction we want to go. So I select that. So we're going to be runway heading to 3,000 feet and then straight ahead. And then it goes into manual sequence after that from that heading of 272. So we'll load that. And that is now in the flight plan. So that's another feature, and we'll see that again when we load the arrival. It's much more useful for when you have a complicated arrival or approach. You can see everything laid out. It's really useful. So that's another feature they've added into the system. So we'll just cursor out here and look at, we're going off 27, so just straight ahead departure up to 3,000 feet. And I'll just show you the departure procedure for that. So it is off of runway 27, climb 272, 3,000 feet. And that's all there is to it. Nice easy departure out of Stewart here, and then it's going to head us off in the right direction. From there we just do a left turn direct to COATE, and we're on our way. Okay, so I think we got everything initially set up, ready to go. So now we can taxi out. So we'll get our taxi light on, and parking brake is released, and we'll start heading out to the runway. It's a bit of a taxi, so I will see you when we get short of the runway, and we'll take off. See you there in a few minutes. Okay, we're just short of the runway, and we'll just finish up setting up for our departure. So put in the altitude is going to be 3,000 feet. Runway heading is 272. We check that our GPS is active and we got our track in there. So we're all set up for that. I'll set my flaps for takeoff. Turn our P2 heat on. Get our strobe light on, landing light on, taxi light off. So I think we're all set up. Flaps are at a takeoff or approach. We have 3,000 feet set. GPS is all set up. It's clear to the left, clear to the right. One other thing I'll just show you here quick. I'm not using ATC in this video, but if I dial in the tower frequency, this might not be from this update, this might have been previously, but if I put in the tower frequency, it now shows Stewart Tower down here as your selected frequency that you're transmitting on. So that's kind of interesting. I've never noticed that before. So that might be new to this edition, but it's a nice feature to show you which frequency is active. If I switch to a different frequency, then that goes away. So it only shows what's active in your transmit window. So that's kind of neat. Anyway, I'll just leave that on there for now. So let's taxi out and get going. Brakes off. It's not bad weather going to Washington today. Just some broken clouds, so we'll go full power. Lined up. Runway heading looks good. T's and P's are good. Airspeed's alive. 5 knots, rotate. Pause rate, gears up. Speed's good, we'll get our flaps up. Climbing our way, 200 feet, get the autopilot on, flight full change. Climb up at 110 knots. We'll activate nav. So gear is up, flaps are up, temperatures and pressures are all looking good. We're climbing away nicely up to 3,000 feet. And I put on our display here. We're going to hit that manual sequence point, and then we're just going to continue on that heading after that point. So leveling off at 3,000 feet, bring the power back a little bit, keep the speed from building up too fast. Sequence, and then what happens is we go to suspend mode here, and so it'll stay on that heading until either we suspend it or we go direct to another fix in the flight plan. So we have suspend there, so we can suspend it, which will get us out of this mode, or we can select direct to fix. So let's go direct to codes. So if we go to flight plan, sequence. So if I select codes, go direct to, enter, activate. So there we go. Now we're off to codes. The suspend goes away, and we're on our way. Now we're going to continue our climb up to our flight planned altitude, which will be 14,000 feet. So we'll put that in our altitude selector window. Flight level change, dial the speed back, and I'll just add some power. 110. Power's back up, and cruising on up to direct coat. GPS active, flight level change 110, and off we go up to 14,000 feet. So that is looking pretty good. Okay, so we'll continue the climb up to 14,000 feet, get above the cloud here, and I might have to put some anti-ice on to get through it. Temperature is -1 right now, not a big deal. So I'll check in with you when we level off, and we'll look at some of the other next features that were added to the NXi. We load the approach, and we'll talk talk about some of the VNAV features as well. Okay, so I'll see you at the top of the climb, and we'll get set up for cruise and set up for arrival into Washington. See you there in a few minutes. Okay, we're at our cruise altitude of 14,000 feet, and so let's just lean out the airplane here. So to do that, this is not a new feature, but just set it up here. So we have our manifold pressure set, and we're going to set our prop RPM back to 2300. Get that ballpark there. So that's pretty close. And then we'll go to our engine, and we'll pick lean, and we'll use a lean assist. And then now we'll bring our mixture back. As our mixture comes back, our exhaust gas temperatures increase, and it's set on the highest exhaust gas temperature for the highest cylinder. And so we're just looking for when it's going to hit peak. And there's peak there on the right engine, and then keep bringing back on the left engine, and there's peak on the left engine. So we hit those peaks, and now we want to enrich the mixture, so we'll go rich until it's 25 degrees rich of peak. That's the best mixture for this, so that's pretty close, 25. And you can see now it's just below the peak values. And that's our mixture set, and that gives us a fuel flow of 8.7 gallons per hour. And we're cruising at 184 true, so it looks pretty good. So manifold pressure set, it's a little bit high, bring it back a little bit. Bring the mixture back a little bit more to 25 degrees. So that's pretty close, and there we go. So we're all set up for lean the aircraft. So that's done. So we're cruising along nicely here, just above the clouds. Got a little bit of a headwind. We're going to start our arrival from Mike X-Ray Echo, so we need to get that set up. So that's what we're going to do now, is we're going to load up the arrival and talk about the approach. So to load up the arrival, we'll go down to our FD page here, and we'll select flight plan. We'll go back to procedures page, and the arrival we're going to load is the Clipper 2. So here's where you see now the Clipper arrival is selected there. So you see the layout of the Clipper arrival. So those are the waypoints. So we'll select that. But then we have for runway 19. So now it's going to show the waypoints for runway 19. And then we're coming in via Mike X-Ray Echo. So now you'll see the whole layout of the arrival here. And if I bring the arrival page up, we can kind of compare it as we are looking at it. So we got Mike X-Ray Echo, and we got Nuggy, Troyes, Belay, Trish, Clipper, Baltimore, Eyes, and Edward, Megs, Nays. So they're all there. So that's the arrival we're going to do. So we hit enter, and now we can load that into the approach. Load it into the GPS. So we're going to load, enter, and there's our arrival loaded in. Okay, so let's talk about this arrival that we're going to do today. I picked this arrival for various reasons because it's going to allow us to look at another feature of the NXi that they've added. So we're coming in via Modena here. And we're going to follow this route up to Nays for runway 19. Now the winds are light in here, and I'm going to use runway 19 even if we're on a different runway here, because it is light winds. Because it's an approach I wanted to show you here. So the arrival, you see when it comes in here, they have these altitudes. So a lot of times you have altitude restrictions, but these are expect to cross altitudes. So they're not necessarily restrictions, it's what you can expect ATC to give you. So you got non-turbojet aircraft expect to cross Nugget at 11,000 feet. Turbojets expect to cross Trish at 12,000 feet, and turbojets expect to cross Baltimore at 10,000 feet. So the only altitude, because we're not a jet, so we're going to have this Nugget expect to cross at 11,000 feet. So now with the new system, NXi update, we can actually put in altitudes into the VNAV page for the arrival. So let's take a look at that and see how to do it. Okay, we're getting closer to Mike X-ray Echo, the start of the arrival here, so we need to set up the arrival for that crossing altitude. So if we look at the arrival, as a non-turbojet aircraft, we're expected to cross Nugget at 11,000 feet, and we want to put that into our MFD, or into our flight plan. So if I select flight plan, I don't have any altitude constraints for this arrival, so I can't highlight it to enter. Highlight the cursor, I can't get over to add an altitude into Nugget. In order to do that, I need to load in an approach which has some altitude constraints. So I'll put in the approach we're going to use. And we're going to use the RVAV approach. And again, you can see now how this loads up the RVAV approach. So that's a preview of the RVAV approach. So I hit enter. And then we're going to do it via Fergie. So now it shows a preview via Fergie. So it's the approach. It follows the river into DCA here. And there's the missed approach. So I can look at all those waypoints, compare them to the approach, and they look good. So I'll select enter for that. Enter my barrel minimums on and set that. And that's going to be 490 feet. And now we can cursor down and load that approach. And this approach has a bunch of altitude constraints associated with it. So if I hit enter, so now I hit enter, you'll see all these altitudes populate, and they are based on predicted altitudes for us to get down to the start of the approach for 3,000 feet. And you'll see 3,000 feet is populated in our magenta window here for our VNAV target altitude, and there's Fergie as our VNAV target altitude as well of 3,000 feet. But I want to now modify Nugget to cross that at 11,000 feet. So here's where the new feature comes in. So I use my FMS knob and I cursor over to the altitudes now, and I can change these altitudes if I want. So I use the inner knob to rotate between the different waypoints and altitudes, and then when I get to that altitude, I use the outer knob to change the digits. So I change the first digit, I can change it to, I want 11,000, so I use the inner knob now. Change it to 11, and there, that's the altitude I want to cross Nugget at. So now I have the altitude I want. I can hit enter, and you'll see it now becomes, if I cursor off it, it's now becomes a cyan number, which is a target number for VNAV to cross that fix. Now if I see VNAV shows the waypoint active for the VNAV profile is now Nugget at 11,000 feet, and so that's how I can alter my VNAV target altitudes. So unfortunately there was no way to, until I loaded an approach in, there was no way for me to access these altitudes because there was no altitudes associated with the arrival. If I loaded an arrival that had a fixed altitude, I could modify them because they're already there, but until I loaded in the approach, these didn't show up for me. Okay, we're 14,000 feet. I'm just inbound to a different fix here now and to DCA, and I just want to show you what happens when you load up an arrival with some altitude constraints in it. So if you remember, we loaded up the last arrival. Initially there was no altitude constraints and we had no access to the altitude windows. But if I load up a different arrival here, so we're going to load up this arrival, it's the DL3, and you can see these actually have altitude, hard altitudes you have to be at, built at 11,000, DL at 10,000, Yuck at 10,000. So what I'm going to do is load up that arrival just to show you how those altitude constraints appear in the procedure here. So we go to procedure, arrival, and this time we want the deal, and we'll do it by 19 again, and we're coming in via RIGD. So that shows all our display here for the arrival again. Those are all the fixes, and it takes us back to where we were, or where we're planning to go for the runway 19 there. So if I load that, now in the flight plan you see those altitude restrictions are encoded hard in there, and so those are in there. I could probably change them if I wanted to. So we got built and deal or 11,000, 10,000 feet, and if I cursor, select my cursor, I can go in and amend the altitudes now if I needed to for some reason, but those are already coded correctly. I can't amend the other altitudes. They don't have the predicted altitudes because I have nothing loaded in. But if I load the approach in again, so we're going to load in the RVAV 19, and we'll do it by a Fergie, and I'll just load the approach. I don't need the barrel minimums again. So I'll load the approach. Now we go to flight plan. So you'll see in the flight plan, the arrival now has those hard altitudes, which are cyan, and those are 11,000 feet. But now, because we have the approach in, it's given us the predicted altitudes like before. So if you initially load up an approach that does have altitude restrictions, they are going to appear there. And once you load the approach, you'll get the predicted altitudes for the remainder of the waypoints. Anyway, I just wanted to show you the difference between loading an arrival with hard altitudes as opposed to the initial one which we loaded, which didn't have anything in it. Okay, so now we'll go back to our original arrival and approach, and we'll continue on into DCA. So I'll see you there. Anyway, so that is the new feature there. Now another feature we can do, so if I go back to the, get rid of the flight plan page here, and we'll see that our top of descent showed up. And so we need to cross Nuggy here at 11,000 feet, and our top of descent now is just prior to Nuggy. And let's say that's going to be based on 3 degrees. So another feature we can do is if I go to the VNAV, so if I hit flight plan again, and I got my cursor active, and I can cursor now down to the VNAV window. So I cursor through everything here, and I get my cursor down on 3 degrees. So that's showing my 3-degree gradient path or flight path angle to cross Nuggy at 11,000 feet is going to require an 800 foot per minute descent, and it's going to be in 14.5 minutes. Well, let's say I want to start a descent, shallower descent a little bit earlier. I want to do a 2 degree, so I can now alter this to a 2 degree. And you can see now it's going to move my descent, top descent point closer, and it's going to change my altitude, vertical target speed altitude, or vertical speed target to 550 feet per minute. So now if I leave that set there, I go out, our top descent now is moved further, closer towards us or further away from Nuggy. So now you see our active altitude is 11,000 feet. And so that's what our VNAV is going to be based on. Okay, so now I can set 11,000 feet for my altitude. And we will engage VNAV. And VPath is active. And we have altitude is active right now. We have VPath armed for crossing Nuggy at 11,000 feet. So what I'll do now is check in with you when we get closer to Nuggy. Actually, first I'll brief the approach that we're going to do while we're here. So the approach we're going to be doing is the RVAV approach for runway 19 into Washington, D.C. And this is a cool approach because it follows the river, probably for noise abatement reasons, to stay over the river, keep you away from the built-up area of the city. And it does a nice curved approach into Washington, D.C. And so what we're going to do is we've loaded this approach. We're going to transition by a Fergie, The arrival finishes up over here, so once we get to the end of the arrival, we'll just activate the approach, which will take us to Fergie, and then in on the RNAV arrival. So we're going to, final approach course is going to be 187. The FAF is at CTOC, so we need to arm the approach before we get to CTOC here at 1,500 feet. And then we're going to go down to RMP 0.11 decision altitude of 491 at 490 in the barrel bug. Touchdown zone elevation is 3,000 feet, and the missed approach, if we needed, is climb 3,000 on a track from the runway 19, then to Baden and hold as published. So it's going to be track straight ahead off runway 19 to Baden, 3,000 feet. That's loaded in as well. So there's our approach we're going to be doing. And we'll see that the altitudes 2,600, 1,700, 1,500 should be coded in blue if I go to my flight plan page here. Cursor down to those altitudes. Sometimes it doesn't. There we go. So cursor. And we look at those altitudes for the approach. So all those altitudes, 3,000 feet for Fergie, 2,600, 1,700, and 1,500 for the FAF are all coded in there. And then we're on a 3-degree gradient path from there on into the rest of the approach. So all these altitudes are coded in for VNAV. So once we activate the approach, we can use VNAV to get us down to those altitudes. Okay, so that's the approach we're going to be doing. So I'll check in with you at the top of descent, and we'll see how the VNAV works. And right now, if I go back to the flight plan, and you can see we're coded at 2-degree flight path angle, -2 degrees. Looking at targeting 540 feet per minute, and that's going to be in 8.5 minutes, just over 8.5 minutes to get to Nugget at 11,000 feet. Okay, so I'll see you there, and we'll watch how that works out. Okay, while we're approaching our top descent, there's another feature I can just show you over here on the MFD. So if I use the outer FMS knob and scroll through these menu items down here, if I scroll over to, now the aux page is active, and they have a system setup page available. And this shows all kinds of information. And the stuff that's in cyan here can be altered. So if I hit my cursor, and you'll see a highlight, I can now cursor and choose between these different items. If for some reason I want it to be true, I can make it true. I'll go to the next item. I can make it different nautical miles or metric. I can put it in kilometers if I need to, if I'm operating in a part of the world that uses that. Just keep it all default here. Altitude feet, you can put it in meters. So go to altitude, and you can have feet or meters. If you go to temperature, you can obviously have Celsius or Fahrenheit, and then you can change pounds, kilograms, I'm assuming. And so these items can be altered if you need to. Right now you can't access any of the other items in here, but that might be coming in the future. Now another one you can do is alter these tracks up here. So I have ground speed, direct track, true track, and ETE. So these are always, if you're activated in GPS mode, your actual track and your direct track are usually the same. Now some useful information I might find up here would be to have my distance to go information. That's over on the other screen here, but sometimes when I'm working on here, it'd be nice to have that up here. So if I go down, cursor down to field 3, which is track, that's my actual track, relevant to what I'm navigating on the GPS. And I use the outer knob here, and let's see if I can find out a distance to go. So I'll just search up the fields here. So distance to go. So I hit enter, and there we go. Now I have distance to go, so I can change these fields up here. The other thing I can change, so I can change any of these fields to any of those items that are in the subsequent menu. And then the last one is I can set my channel spacing for the radio. So you need this 833 kilohertz if you're operating in Europe, but you don't need it in North America. So if you want to change that, if I go to the other selection, which is 25 kilohertz. I hit enter. Now that should change that to, you see it's changed to a 2-digit frequency base instead of a 3-digit frequency base. No, the comm still shows 3 digits, so I guess it doesn't actually change it. Anyway, I'll put it back into 8.33. So the thing is, channel spacing should go to 2 digits if it's in 25 kilohertz, and then 3 digits if it's in 8.33 kilohertz. So for some reason it's not changing it up in our selection window here, so I'll just put it back to the default and leave it at that. Okay, so that is the other feature that's added to this menu page down here. If I get rid of my cursor and then I can get out of this page, I'm just selecting the inner FMS knob here. Go back to our map. So that's on the aux page, system setup, and that's where you can access all these features in the system setup page. And then we all have still have our nearest functions that we can use, and our waypoint information function. So let's say if I want to go to get the ATIS frequency for DCA, so I can use go over to the waypoint page, and I select the inner knob here until I get to airport information. I can activate my cursor and put in KDCA. Hit enter. Now I can see what runways are available here, so use the inner knob, I can see the different runways that are available, and I can cursor down to find out what the ATIS is, and that's the ATIS. So if I select that, hit enter, it's going to put it into my standby window. So there's my standby window, so now I have that for when I get closer to Washington and I want to get the ATIS. So I'll just get rid of this page here, and then there we go. Okay, so that's another feature that we have added. So now we're only a few minutes away from our top of descent. So we'll go to flight plan, we're only 2.5 minutes away. So I'll check in with you just when we hit that top of descent, and we'll make the descent down to Nugget. Okay, now we're coming up to our top of descent. You can see our VNAV path starting to show up. We got VPath armed. If I open up the flight plan, we're still planning a 2-degree flight path angle. It's going to happen in 49 seconds. And we'll start our descent down to our target altitude of 11,000 feet. Now let's say I want to actually put down our target altitude of 3,000 feet, which is our initial altitude for the approach. So I'll put that in the window, and we'll see what happens when we hit that 11,000 foot altitude. If it sequences the VNAV, it gives us a new top of descent there. Okay, so there's VPath active, and VAlt is armed, and we're starting our descent at a nice slow 500 feet per minute to reach that altitude at Nugget. So I'll just keep the power where it is, keep the speed up, off we go, and I'll check in with you when we level off at Nugget, and we'll see what happens. There's the bottom of descent for that 11,000 foot altitude at Nugget, and so I'll check in with you when we level off there, and we'll see what happens when we hit Nugget. Okay, we're just coming up to Nugget, and we have 500 feet to go. Should level off at Nugget, and then maintain at 11,000 feet if we look at our flight plan after Nugget. It's going to just maintain us at 11,000 feet for quite a while because it's quite a long arrival. So we're going to stay at 11,000 feet for quite a ways in. So we hit Nugget here at 11,000 feet. And we should capture the vertical altitude. And there we go. So that's captured for 11,000 feet. I'll keep the power up, keep the speed up. We cross that fix. And as we cross the fix, now we have altitude capture at 11,000 feet, and we have an alert down here. This is another new feature they've added to the NXi. So they have the alerts page show up here, and it says VNAV unavailable, unsupported leg type in the flight plan. So what that's telling me is that VNAV is, so VPath is not armed anymore. If I try to arm VNAV, it'll go back to VPath, but I have that alert that VNAV is unavailable. And I still have the 11,000 foot target altitude here for now because I have no other restricted altitude associated with the approach. So VPath is never going to arm here, so I'll just shut that off here. And what that tells me is that, I believe anyway, I'm not 100% sure, but it's just because there's no other altitudes until we get to the approach that's going to trigger VNAV profile. So it does have Fergie down as our next active waypoint because that's magenta, but then our problem is our flight plan ends with a manual sequence, so we have to suspend that before we can activate this this VNAV profile. So that's, I think, what's holding us up here for VNAV, and that's why we got that alert that VNAV is not active. Now, what I can do is, let's say I want to be down at 3,000 feet via Naze to make that transition. So it's planning right now to make the transition of 3,300. So let's make this altitude hard at Naze of 3,300 feet, and then that will give us a top of descent point for our, and give us another VNAV profile for continuing our descent here. So if I go cursor up to that altitude, and I just hit the inner knob, and so I want the 0, and so if I just go enter, figuring this out too here, so we got that. So let's make that 3,300. Enter. So now we have a new waypoint. These 3,300, and we got a VPath active. And there's 3,300. So that alert went away. So now if I activate VNAV again, and I put 3,300 feet in my, well, it doesn't matter what I have here, as long as it's this or lower, my VNAV path should activate for that waypoint Naze. So if I look at my flight plan here, and we should see a top of descent, and there's a top of descent marker. I'll get rid of all this clutter here. So there's our top of descent point now for our descent to reach Naze at 3,300 feet, which will allow us to get down soon enough to make the transition for our approach. So we got a ways to go till we hit Naze, so I'll just keep that altitude in there. So you see, it's nice to be able to amend these altitudes in your VNAV profile. It's going to help you with your descent planning for coming in on these arrivals. And so let's check in when we get to the top of descent, and then we'll see how we make the transition from there to the approach. See you in a few minutes. Oh, before I sign off here, I did go back and change that kilohertz setting, and what it does do, it still leaves the 3 digits show up here, but it changes the frequency adjustment. So now when I adjust the frequency, it goes by increments of 0.25 instead of the 0.5, 0.833. So it does work if you change it. So it just reduces the amount of times you have to spin the dial to adjust the frequencies here. So if you're in North America, the 0.25 should work fine. If you're in Europe, you're going to need the 0.83. So that was back on the, if I go to the FMS, that was back on the auxiliary system setup page, and that was back here channel spacing. So if I go back to that and hit my cursor and I select that and I go back to the 8.33 kilohertz, enter. if I go and change the frequencies up here, you see the steps are more frequent. So it's 0.833 kilohertz increments. So that does work. So it keeps the display still 3 digits, but it just changes the increments that you're setting the decimal point on the kilohertz display, frequency display here. Okay, so I'll check in with you now when we get a little closer to our top of descent, and we'll continue our descent into Washington. See you there in a few minutes. Okay, we're getting closer to our top of descent. We have a broken cloud layer underneath us here. Temperature is -2 degrees. It's not really thick. Kind of see through it there, but I want to minimize my time in the cloud. So here's another use for planning our descent. If we go, we see our top of descent's coming up here, so go to the flight plan. It's coming up in 3 minutes and 22 seconds. I put our altitude back to 11,000 feet because that's where our last cleared altitude was, and so until we get cleared lower, that's the altitude that should be in your altitude window. And if I go to flight plan here, so I want to look at this, and we're going to just start our descent in 3 minutes to get that planned altitude of NAs at 3,300 feet. That's going to be about 800 feet per minute, but if I want to descend through that cloud faster, so I want to stay above it as long as I can, and then do a higher rate of descent to get down through it faster. So a good way to do that is just down to cursor down to our flight path angle here, and I can actually now make that a steeper descent. So I can go to 6 degree flight path angle, and it's going to now increase that top of descent to 7 minutes away, but it's going to give me a 1,600 foot per minute descent. Should have no problem attaining that in this aircraft. So that's going to allow me to descend faster through the cloud and minimize my time in the cloud to pick up any icing on the descent. So that's another feature you can use if you want. You can have a more gradual descent, or you can make a steeper descent. So I'm going to leave that set for there. Now you see our top of descent is going to be a little further along here. It's quite a ways up now, and that's going to be a faster descent to get down to NAs at 3,300 feet. And then at some point between MEGs and NAs, we'll probably transition on to our approach. So I'll check with you again now. We've got a little further to go to that top of descent, so then we'll request our descent to final. So we got 6 minutes to go, so I'll check in with you when we get closer, and we'll start our initial descent. See you in a few minutes. Okay, we're just coming up to our top of descent. If I bring up the flight plan page here, and you can see we're 55 seconds ago. So I'd request further descent, and let's say ATC cleared us. You cleared to descend to 3,000 feet, pilot's discretion, expect the RNAV runway 19. So we're cleared at 3,000 feet, so I'll set that in my altitude selector window. And we got 3,000 feet set. I'll engage VNAV, and VPath is armed, and we'll start our descent here momentarily. Now I got the weather up here while we're looking at it. The winds are 150 which is good for 19, just some few clouds. 9 degrees, altimeter 3015, so we can set that. 3015 set. Here comes our vertical path indicator. And now we're going to be doing this descent at about 1,700 feet a minute, so I'm going to have to bring back lots of power to keep the speed from building up too much, so I'll bring the power back. And we'll keep the speed set, and there we go, a nice fast descent that'll get us down through the clouds. It's starting to scatter out a little bit more, but it'll get us down through these clouds a little bit faster because we're right at the freezing level here. Okay, so there goes our descent. You can see our approach starts at Fergie here, so some point the ATC is going to take us on radar vectors. If we get all the way to NAs here, then we are just on a downwind determination waypoint, which is just radar vectors from there, or heading till we get radar vectors, but I don't think ATC would take us that far. So at some point past MEGs here, we can anticipate getting clear direct Fergie for the approach. So the descent's going pretty good here. Through 10,000 feet, we'll get our landing light on. Altimeter is set. Speed is good. We've got a nice good descent going here, and eventually we'll transition onto the approach here. So I'd say right about here we'll request see ATC, simulate ATC clears us for the approach. That's coming along nicely. So once we get clear for the approach, all we need to do is hit the procedure button and then activate the approach, and then that will cancel the remaining portion of the arrival and take us direct to Fergie for the RNAV approach. And we're cleared to 3,000 feet. The 3,300 feet we have in our magenta altitude is our VNAV altitude that we set for crossing Nays at 3,300 feet. So not necessarily going to get there, but it's just something to help us with our path to start our descent. Okay, so let's say ATC said you're cleared direct Fergie for the RNAV runway 19. So if I go to procedure, and I don't want to activate vectors to final, I want to make sure I activate the approach. Otherwise, it's going to get rid of a bunch of waypoints. It's going to take us to the final waypoint, which is CTOC, I think, there. So activate the approach, enter, and then off we go. And now you can see our window has changed to our VPath of 3,000 feet. And we're starting our transition to Fergie. Okay, so we're inbound to Fergie. Got 3,000 feet, so we want to see if we can capture the path here. And actually, so VPath, and we are going to select now our altitude of 1,500 feet, which is the FAF crossing altitude. And we should continue to follow that VPath down now until we hit the 1,500 feet. And then some point prior to the FAF, we need to arm the approach. Okay, so 1,600 feet is our next crossing altitude. So speed is coming back. Sorry, 2,600 feet. So 1,500 feet is what I want set in my altitude selector. So 2,600 feet is our next crossing altitude. And then we're going to do a step down to 1,700 feet and then 1,500 feet. And we need to arm the approach before SATOC. So now this approach is really cool. It's just going to follow the river and just get us lined up. You can see runway, I think it's 15 here, and then 19 is over here. So we're going to follow the river down and end up coming in on runway 19. So it's a nice curved RNAV approach. So what I'm going to do is arm the approach. So glide path is armed and VAlt is armed for 1,500 feet. We're minimum set, so get the gear down, bring the power back, get our props full, mixture full, landing light is on, and we'll start bringing the power back to bring our speed back to get our flaps out. Okay, so we're continuing on the approach here. It's visual, but we're just going to follow the approach procedure. Stays over the water, over the river. Speed's coming back. Start getting ready to get our first notch of flap out. And gears down through green. Altimeter set. So we're coming up on 1,500 feet. FAF is at SATOC here, and then we should capture the glide path hopefully there. This is a pretty cool approach. So it's going to make a turn here to follow along the river. So we'll get our approach flap out. So we're capturing the 1,500 foot altitude, and then you can see our glide path starting to come in. We got an alert saying VNAV unavailable anymore, so that's fine. So we're altitude captured, so we switched to altitude captured, and now we're glide path captured. Continue the 3-degree glide path descent down to the FAF, or to the misapproachable. So It's following the river there. So gears down, flaps are at approach, land flap to go. Got our landing lights are on. And there we go. There's the airport right there. Back the power, keep the speed under control. See the approach there, just following the river. So that's not the runway we're going to land on. We're going to land on this runway over here. It's 1,000 feet. So we're capturing the glide path. The missed approach altitude is 3,000 feet. So I'll put that in our altitude window in case we need it. Speed is good. We'll get our land flap for about 100 knots. So we'll add some power in. So gear is down. Flaps are at land. Looking good. There's runway 19 coming into final view. Up to minimums. There's minimums. Runway in sight. Continue. And when we get rolled out on final, I'll just disengage the autopilot and then we'll land. So this is a really cool approach coming into Washington, D.C. So autopilot disengaged. Speed's good. So we'll be clear to land. Touchdown. Welcome to Washington. That's a really cool approach. I'm not sure if it's available for everyone. It might only be available if you have Navgraph data, which I use. So that approach might not be available to everyone. If you do have Navgraph data, it's definitely available. But it is a really cool approach if you want to try it. Okay, we'll just make our exit here at the first available turnoff point. Just make a right turn here. I got the scenery for Washington, D.C. when it was on sale in the marketplace there. Thanksgiving weekend there when they had their big Black Friday sales. This is awesome scenery actually if you ever want to get it. It's got it's a really nice airport. Okay, so we're clear. And look at our flaps up. Get our landing light off, strobe light off, taxi light on. I'm not going to taxi in, we'll just finish the flight right here. So there you go. That's the most of the new features. I think I covered off pretty much everything on the NXi in this update. This system's really come a long way. It's got so many features incorporated into it now. It's really an awesome system to use. It works pretty much most of the time. You just got to be aware, especially in your FMA, which is your flight management awareness here, just what you have set, what's active. And this system is very capable now, and I find it's really come a long way. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy it, make sure you hit the thumbs up and sign up for more notifications, or subscribe to the channel, or sign up for notifications if you haven't subscribed to the channel. And if you want to see more videos like this, including my Round the World series in the Diamond DA62, hopefully they'll fix the NXi update so I can use that in the next flight I do in the Diamond DA62. So thanks for joining me. It's a pleasure having you along for the flight today. I really think the NXi is a great system, and it's definitely come a long way. So hope you enjoy using it too. We'll see you next time on the channel. Bandit out.